Welcome to the Small Business Blueprint, a podcast for local business owners who are looking to reach sustainable growth. In each episode, you'll hear directly from small business owners and leaders who have navigated the changes and setbacks that outline their unique blueprint to small business success. So join us to learn how you can turn their stories into actionable steps to transform your business into an established brand in your community.
Welcome into the Small Business Blueprint podcast. My name's Alex, your host. And today we're coming to you with a guest who brings a very unique perspective for anybody who listens to our podcast because he covers so many elements of what it takes to run a business, get a business to a franchise level. There are so many things that this guy has done already as a young business owner. And today we're talking with Mike Andes of Augusta Lawn Care Services. Mike, how you doing this afternoon?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Alex. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. We were so excited to even get you on board with what we're doing here at the Small Business Blueprint because you really do bring a very unique perspective to not only the listeners of our podcast, but to really what our end goal is here with the Small Business Blueprint of helping business owners take the next step in their business, allowing business owners to gather some extra tools and knowledge along the way. So really, to get this all started, Augusta Lawn Care Services, how did you guys get going? How long have you guys been around? And really tell us anything and everything you can about the business, your business model, and what you're looking to do here over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I think, if for every small entrepreneur or business owner, we've watched or listened to the E-Myth and Michael Gerber's book, and we've heard about McDonald's and franchising in general and creating systems and procedures. And so I think for a lot of us, we thought about that business model as being potentially either what we use to get started in business or potentially scale our business and use that as the model by which we're going to do multiple locations and become a franchisor. And so it's a very unique business model. I don't think it's for everyone. I also think that some industries work better with the franchising model. But in terms of how we got started, I started mowing lawns when I was 11 years old. I did it in order to save up for college. I started college when I was really young. I was 13 years old when I started college, and I thought I was going to become a medical doctor, so I wanted to get started as soon as possible. And so went through college, thought I was going to become a medical doctor, applied for medical school, ended up dropping out of my applications when I was 18 for medical school and getting my MBA instead. And that was after going to Africa and doing a bunch of medical stuff over there, coming back to the US, not really feeling like I wanted to be in the same very unique specialty of surgery for the next 40 years of my life. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to do this entrepreneurship thing and I can kind of scratch multiple itches. So I basically scaled up the lawn care business from that point when I was 18 years old. Today I'm 25 years old. We franchised Augusta Lawn Care about 2 years ago now. And so we have over 40 locations around North America. And I actually, like you said, have a little bit of a unique perspective because I actually became a franchisee of Anytime Fitness about a year before franchising Augusta Lawn Care, really to learn the business model, learn how to train franchisees, what's expected of a franchisor. And so we've been growing, obviously, the gym, Anytime Fitness, a totally different industry, completely different impact from even the pandemic last year versus a service-based business like we have with Augusta Lawn Care. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride, and we're looking to get 500 franchisees over the next 5 or 6 years. And so we're just kind of growing and scaling from here.
Mike, in terms of what you learned as a franchisee of an Anytime Fitness, what tools did you pick up as a franchisee that allowed you to take that next step with Augusta Lawn Care Services?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was to know what a franchisee's pain points are as they begin to grow. Because when a franchisee is getting started, they have a whole completely different subset of what they need to know, what the amount of contact they have with the franchisor, the support that they need. Whereas as they grow, there's different pain points. And a lot of times there's friction that is created between them and the franchisor, especially when there is franchise fees involved. Right. So one of the things that I learned as a franchisee was that like the set fee model was what we wanted to use for Augusta instead of a royalty, because otherwise, as the franchisee needs me less as a franchisor, they're paying me more because I'm getting 10% or 8% of their revenue. And that was a very tough sell as a franchisor, and something that was a friction point, as well as just knowing what's expected of a franchisor in terms of communication and support was a big thing for me to be able to have confidence when we started Augusta Lawn Care, to know that, hey, I am taking care of our franchisees and I'm doing a better job than someone like Anytime Fitness, in my opinion. And therefore I felt good about it.
Okay. And for those who are unaware, what do those two business models quickly break down into? I know you mentioned there's royalty fees. You guys wanted to do it a different way. So what are the two distinct differences there? Just a quick quick bullet points.
Yeah, so in general, most franchises are going to be broke up into their set fee model or a royalty, right? So royalty is typically going to be 4 to 8% of a royalty fee plus a percentage towards a marketing fund. We wanted to simplify as much as possible and say, hey, there's a flat set monthly fee, and at Anytime Fitness they have, like equipment fees and software fees and other things on top of the franchise fee. But we want to make that just as flat as possible. And so we have a flat $1,200 per month royalty or flat fee that we charge our franchisees.
Got it. Okay. So when it comes to selling, being a franchise owner, what are some of the most difficult obstacles that you have to sell that franchise to a franchise owner?
Yeah, like the biggest struggle, honestly, is trust, right? Because there are so many, bad franchisors out there, and there's certain laws in place to keep those people out. But there's definitely a trust element that has to be built with the franchisee to sell them on a 10-year relationship, basically, with your brand. I think a lot of that comes down to why I've built a personal brand, to create that relationship and create that trust before they even get on a phone call and consider a franchise.
Nice. And in terms of those franchise fees, what does that typically look like, and how do you guys compare to anybody else that's looking to start a franchise?
Yeah, in terms of Augusta Lawn Care, you mean?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so typically, like in the lawn care landscape industry, it's pretty common to be paying about 4 to 8% of your gross revenue towards a franchisor, and then on top of that, having like a marketing. So usually 8 to 10% of your revenue is going out the door. And so our goal by having the set monthly fee is like, look, scale as big as you can, as big as you want to, and we're not going to penalize you by taking a percentage of that. And so I can confidently get on a coaching call with a franchisee and tell them to grow their business, tell them to go get more sales, knowing that they know that I don't have some sort of perverse incentive by just inflating their top line revenue. And in my mind, getting the franchisor and the franchisee to both have the same goals is what's important. And for me as a franchisor, the biggest thing for me from a financial standpoint is to keep them in business and make it sustainable. And so I feel like that aligns so that when I give them advice, they know that I'm not just trying to inflate their top line revenue numbers. And that's common in service-based franchisees where they'll tell you, okay, you got to start with 4 employees and a salesperson and a big shop. They're doing that because they know right away you've got to be doing a $500,000, $600,000 per year run rate. Otherwise, you're not even going to make a penny. And they know right off the top of that, they're making 50 or 60 grand, right? So that's where, as a franchisee, I want to know that when a franchisor tells me advice, that they're in the best interest of my business, not just the top line revenue.
Love it. Okay. What would you say is the main misconception people have about starting or running a lawn care business, or even becoming one of your franchisees?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception is that, it's a really easy business, right? It is to some extent. I think it's a great business to get started with, really, sharpen your knife when it comes to business and learning things like marketing, advertising, hiring. But I think the thing that makes it challenging is it's very, very hard to create systems around the actual product, right? It's not like we're having a systematized, coming down a conveyor belt and an assembly line where it's a factory. It's much more of a service-based business where it's up to the discretion of an employee in terms of quality, for example. So creating those systems is a little more difficult because you're depending on human error. And hiring right now is the most difficult thing in our business, the most difficult hurdle for growth, as it is for most service-based businesses. And so that is the hardest part. And I think the misconception is like, oh, you just mow grass. Like, that's easy. Theoretically, yes, but when you start throwing entry-level employees, they somehow figure out every single hole in your systems if you haven't nailed those down. And as good as the systems that we've built, there's still human error, and we still depend on an employee to do a good job and make straight lines with a mower, and that can be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Have you guys been able to target any strategies to get over that hiring hump? I know this is something that's very big in not only the small business community, but it's big in every industry right now. Every industry is hurting for employees at this current
Mhm.
moment. Have you guys been able to find any strategies to help overcome some of those obstacles when it comes to hiring good new employees?
Like, I think at the end of the day, like, the employee has a lot more options now, right?
Hmm.
They're no longer comparing a $12 and a $13 an hour job. They're comparing a $15 and a $16 an hour job with incentives for like a free iPhone if you sign up at McDonald's, right? So
Right.
now when in our industry, we've never competed with fast food, we've never competed with hospitality, we've never competed with the airlines, but now they're all raising their rates along with their inflated stock prices, and they can afford it. So that makes it more challenging for us who are typically 30% higher wage than them. Well, now they're competing with us. And so in terms of how to make your option the best for the employees, how can you afford more? Right? How can you make your business in a way that's profitable enough to actually afford $20 an hour when they're getting offers for 15 or 16? And so one of those ways is, looking at what we call P for P, or pay for performance, where the employee gets a percentage of the labor revenue instead of an hourly rate, right? So
Okay.
I think this is a very important thing for any service business where there's labor that comes into play, because at the end of the day, you have two laborers. One is extremely efficient and can literally make 3 or 4 times as much profit as the next guy that is lazy, taking breaks all the time, sleeping in their truck, on their phone, and yet they might make $2 or $3 more per hour. So it's not fair for the employees, and it doesn't give them any more incentive to work hard and be more efficient. And so, in our opinion, really making labor efficient, which is the biggest variable cost for most of our small businesses at the entry level, in terms of labor. And so to standardize that by giving a percentage of the labor revenue to the employee is really a great way to ensure that, number one, we're efficient and profitable. Number two, we can afford to pay, premium top line employees a premium price and pay them more money.
I love everything you just mentioned right there. I wouldn't be surprised if more and more companies start adopting that same philosophy, because it's one of those things that helps bring in better employees. You're rewarding them for that hard work, as opposed to somebody who comes in off the street and, where's the incentive to come in and work hard? Um, and that really benefits everybody. It's one of those rising tide lifts all boats scenarios, where if you have those good employees that are still working hard, they're staying with your business, they're more invested in what you're doing.
I think
And
the
that,
hourly model is almost lazy to say, like, oh yeah, we just, it's fast, it's simple. Look, you're literally just competing on dollars per hour on Craigslist ad or Facebook ad or whatever. It takes a lot more work and a little more. You've got to really know your numbers to create a system where you're giving a percentage of labor revenue to the employee. It takes time, it takes effort. It's not easy. I understand that, but at the end of the day, it's lazy just to throw up an hourly rate. And at the end of the day, if you're competing on that, yeah, you're going to be 20-30% higher right now than you were a few years ago or even a
Mhm.
year ago. And I feel like the bottom line is, if you're paying people, oh well, you get $3 more per hour if you've been here for 2 years. Why? What if that employee is making less for the business than the guy who just got started last week, but is hungry, wants to provide for their family, get ahead in life? I feel like that person just starting out, if they're making more money for the business, they should be making more money too. And so it's a complete meritocracy by which the person who makes more money for the business makes more money themselves. And I feel like every labor position across every industry will eventually have to go that route, especially as we have social programs offering more and more money,
Mhm.
where the C players of our labor industry are going to just go on benefits. And you can't attract them. You're going to have to go after the cream of the crop. And to attract those people, you're going to have not only a higher paying position, you're also going to have a place when they come to work with other people, they're working with other A players. It's
Mhm.
very demotivating to work with the guy who sits in the truck on his phone all day, and that the boss doesn't fire them because they need hands on the job.
Right.
And so I think by having something like P4P, you weed those people out.
Absolutely. As someone who's a former sales rep, that just spoke right to my heart. So I very much appreciate, especially coming up with a business model that works not only for the business owner, but for the employee as well. And that's been one of the hardest struggles that businesses all across the country are dealing with right now, is how do we attract the top cream of the crop employees? How do we attract any employees in
Yeah.
general, especially at some businesses? Um, And how do you provide that extra incentive for the good employees that keep them around, that keep them invested in your business? So I love that idea of the P for P, keeping people invested in their own performance. That I absolutely love that. What's something that surprised you or maybe you weren't expecting when you started your franchise and started both an Anytime Fitness franchisee and then as someone who's also now a franchisor as well?
From a more micro standpoint, the pandemic hit all of our franchisees their very first year, right? So we started in September of 2019 in terms of franchising, but spring is obviously our biggest time for us to grow. So all of our new franchisees, as going into spring, we hit the pandemic, which caused a lot of hardship for the people who didn't have much marketing budget, because they were planning on going door to door, passing out door hangers, very much more boots on the ground. Well, now people aren't answering the door. People don't want to talk to you. They get mad at you if you show up at the door. So that was a bit of a hurdle for them, the ones that didn't have as much money to go spend on Facebook ads or Google ads or YouTube, etc. So in the micro, I think that was probably the biggest hurdle. And then even too, at our command center, our call center, where we have all of our staff here that takes their calls and everything, we all had to go virtual. So that was also, in the micro, I'd say COVID was a big hurdle for us. In terms of surprise outside of that, just in franchising in general, I think I'm surprised by the lack of communication in so many organizations from the top of the organization down to the bottom, whether that be in a franchise model where you have a franchisor to the franchisees, or whether it be much more local level from a head boss or managers down to the frontline workers, to know what's going on, whether it be profit sharing, whether it be OpenBook Management, knowing what's happening in the business. Right. And so, what led me to that even too, though, is as a franchisee at Anytime Fitness, obviously the gym industry was upended last year as well. And to see the breakdown of communication, how that impacted the organization as a whole was pretty tremendous. A lack of communication, in my opinion, really led to so many different fractures that were just emphasized or accentuated by COVID.
Got it. Yeah. Especially being in the gym industry, like that industry was just hammered last year. And trying to find new ways to keep those gyms open. Did you guys find any, touching back on that very quickly, were you guys able to find any unique strategies for keeping the gym open that maybe will be easier to do moving forward? Really, what did you guys learn from owning a gym last year?
Yeah, well, within 24 hours, we went from being open to being closed, and 24 hours earlier than that, not thinking anything about having to close down our business. And then next thing we know, there's a government mandate saying we have to close. So that was a big shift. We had to pivot to online virtual training. It was definitely not as profitable, but it was definitely just a way to keep in touch with our clients. And then all of a sudden we are thinking about literally the most crazy things that now seem almost crazy. Back then seemed nuts, but we seemed like we had to do. And that was things like literally putting a grid of tape 6 feet apart on the entire gym floor, putting up plexiglass between machines, putting down, because like, for example, in a gym, the problem is you get down on the floor and touch where people's feet have been. Well, now we got to make sure that their feet coming in the door are clean. So, like, do we have foot scrubbers? Do we have shoes? Do we remove their shoes? Do we have little foot things, like little wraps around people's shoes? Like the craziest stuff we all of a sudden had to start thinking about. Dehumidifiers and air fresheners and purifiers and masks and no new guests, no new members, only current members. Like the craziest stuff we had to think about all of a sudden. That fortunately now are done away with. But we were closed for 3 to 4 months. And honestly, we probably, theoretically, if we were living by the perfect law of the land, we probably would have been closed for 6 or 7 months. We opened up probably a little bit premature, but we felt like we were opening up for a couple of reasons. One, at the gym specifically, was the health of our clients and the mental health for our clients. And then 2 was the fact that we felt they were just as safe in our club as going to the grocery store next door. And we were more safe in terms of the protocol that we had in place and masks, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally understand that. You're trying to get back out there and help people. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons people join gyms is they're looking to better themselves, looking to better their life, looking to take some stress off their plate, whatever the case may be. They're looking for that extra release. And if you guys can provide that extra release in a safe environment, that's a win-win for everybody. Flipping gears just a little bit. I know you mentioned that you really learned how to communicate not only from your experience as a franchisee, but you were then able to take that experience to the franchisor level. What did you learn, especially in how to ensure good communication across multiple locations?
Yeah, like I think the biggest thing is whether you're a franchisee with multiple locations like us or you have 3 or 4 employees, the bottom line is I feel like people at the bottom of the organizational level, if they don't have information, they're going to come up with it in their head. So what I mean by that is if franchisees aren't communicated with, they're just going to assume certain things like, oh, like I saw this happen with a franchise and now I'm wondering if there's not enough money. Are we not liquid enough? Is the franchisor going to go bankrupt? Are they looking to sell the business? What's the franchise motive behind this? So being really upfront, like, look, they know exactly where we're at in terms of funding. They know exactly what the goals of the business are. They know exactly what my role is going to look like. They know what we're going to be doing in 2 or 3 years in terms of software development. They know where we're going. There's no questions. And if there is questions, I'll answer them like in an open forum. There's no, death of morale in the background behind closed doors. And they're encouraged to bring things up to me as a franchisor in a very open dialogue. And so I think, whether it be, weekly, we're sending out video updates and sharing things that's just going on at the franchise, plans for the future, what we're trying to work on, what's new, what's upcoming, quarterly Zoom calls with all the franchise owners, things like that. It just, again, whether it be a franchisor in multiple locations or that be you have a bunch of employees, communicating with them, do they just know where your thoughts are, what your plan for the future is? And I think we can get siloed with managers like, oh, we're going to have our managers meeting, have a lunch. Great, that's great. You need to do that to make decisions. But what about everyone else that's not in that closed room meeting? And they're going to be coming up with thoughts and ideas too. And they're going to usually default to thinking you're doing things against them. You're trying to do things behind their back. And they have all the reason to think that if you're not being open and clear with your intentions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost human instinct to assume the worst. Hope for the best, but assume the worst, especially when it comes to a situation where you're not given enough information. Why is that information being withheld? And it's just a natural progression of, being human to assume the worst and generally, almost all those situations.
Absolutely. And I think like the open book management on a micro level with if you have one location is so important is to give that information to the employee. I think so many of us as business owners are like, man, I just wish my employees would treat my business like an owner, right? Well, if you want that, you've got to give them 2 things. You've got to give them the information that an owner has and the compensation that an owner has. And so P for P is the compensation element, but open book management and sharing the numbers, sharing what's going on in the business, that's the information part that they're going to need if you want them to think or even have the ability to think like an owner would when it comes to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the number one thing you hear from any good managers, having that ownership mentality, right? And usually the best employees have that ownership mentality. But if you don't treat them like an owner, it's hard for them to act like an owner. And so I love that philosophy of keeping things as open as possible. My last question here for you, how do you ensure each of your locations delivers that same quality of service that your customers expect since you've gone into this franchising model? How do you guys keep everything going in a good direction and keep that reputation of your business going in a good direction as well?
Yeah, that's a tough part. And like the reality of it that was difficult even this past spring is we did have to close a location that was not upholding the brand standards. We ended on good terms. That franchisee, still talks to me, et cetera. But it was definitely something we had to close down because they were not following the systems. They did not have good customer service. There was too many complaints being brought in and they were giving plenty of warning, but eventually we had to pull the plug. And that's tough, right? Someone that you've worked with, you try to really grind and help them through it and they just don't, and you have to close them down. And so that helps the overall brand though, because the other franchisees see that you actually care about the brand. You're not doing it for just the money. Like just keeping them would have been fine. I just get my monthly check and like, let's go. But protecting the brand is important, protecting the brand image. And especially as the franchisee locations get closer, they're going to start having an impact on other locations. So in order to do that, the best thing that we have going for us is the fact that we have command center, we call it, where we do all their phone calls, estimates, invoicing, a lot of their admin work. So we really keep a pulse on a lot of things that are going on. We get the client information, the client emails that are screaming at them because they did stuff wrong. Like we get all of that feedback, and from that can make decisions based upon which locations need some more support, more training, or they are going off the brand systems that we would recommend.
Okay, great. Mike Andes, if you wouldn't mind, let us know where everybody can find you. I know you also dabble in podcasting as well, and you have an awesome YouTube channel. Our listeners know where they can find you if they want to get more information, not only on becoming a franchise owner, but if they just want to follow you and your story as you continue to move forward. Where would our listeners be able to find that information?
Yeah, like I really like YouTube and video stuff. So I just, Mike Andy on YouTube. But then, the podcast is Business Bootcamp Podcast is more general. And then if you're more focused on lawn care and landscaping, Landscape Business Course Podcast is there as well.
Awesome. And we can find that on all the streaming sites, Spotify, Apple, all those places. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate it, and look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Small Business Blueprint. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by GoSite, an all-in-one platform that makes it easier for your customers to find, book, and pay for your services online instantly. Get started for free at GoSite.com.